Hello. Happy Tuesday as I am recording this. Welcome to another episode of Rulebook Read Along. I am your host. Hi. I don't have any programming notes. I suppose I should mention that I now have forums are up and available. They're over at forums.hexed.press. If you want to check it out, it's kind of in beta. So I'm manually approving people. So if you do decide to sign up and come hang out, and I could use folks to help me add some content into the space, you might find that you don't get to sign up right away, or you get to sign up but you won't get in right away. I have to manually approve you. I've been trying to do it as fast as I get notified that I have some. But if there is a delay, it is totally my fault. But just hang. Boy, there we go. Just hang tight. I'll get to it. That's all I've got for the moment. I guess I'll say also apologies for yesterday, the echo issues. I'm hoping that there are no echoes today. Hopefully that was just a one-time only, once a year, 2022 echo special on the stream. But it was good, and I got some... I feel like positive feedback on conceptually on that series, so I'm going to keep doing it. And I've got a couple of other people lined up. If you know somebody who feels strongly about a system, send them my way. Send them a note to contact me. I'd love to have them chat about it. I'm not sure at this point if I wanted to have people coming in and pimping their own system for it. I suppose I should say what it is. So yesterday, the stream that went awry was one that I called Sell Me On something. And in this case, it was Genesis. The idea behind it is someone who feels passionately about a system or mechanic. It doesn't have to be a whole system. It could be really any aspect of a system or really anything else. It could be a setting. I would love to have people who feel passionately about specific settings come in and talk about it. It's not really the idea is to come in and talk about, well, I created this system and let me tell you how passionate I am about it. I mean, I suppose I could do it, but ideally, I think I'd like someone to be passionate about something else, and maybe down the line get people who are talking about their own kind of home stuff. But it's more about, hey, this is a system that I think is, or a mechanic, or a setting, whatever it is, that's underrespected, underutilized, and not given its due as far as I'm concerned, or not recognized, or just something that I just really like and I want to tell people, and so they can see what I really like about the system. That's the idea. Again, the echoing and the problems with that put a bit of a damper on that first episode, but I think as a concept, I really like the idea, and I have some other people who we're going to come in and talk about theirs soon. So looking forward to that. But let's get down to brass tacks, shall we? And I decided, why not? I have all these Dragon digital copies of the Dragon and others. And I have I think I have all the strategic reviews, and I know there's a bunch of other ones, but I don't know. The Dragon just seems like a kind of iconic magazine in the D&D universe. And having stumbled back across that folder I have of all these, I thought, oh yeah, it would be kind of cool to go through and look at this. Whether we read it all or kind of pick and choose, I'll kind of... I don't know, we'll just have to kind of play it by ear, play it by eye. I love the cover here with this dragon. I'm not sure if, sometimes things don't look the same in PDF or digitally as they look in actual print or in person, but man, the kind of red to pink bands of color with that gold over the top, you cannot... I mean, I kind of know that's Fritz Lieber's conversation with Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, and then it says languages in D&D, and then we have part 1 in a new fantasy novel, the Gnome Cache. But boy, they could have maybe chosen a different combination, done something, because not very readable. But we're they are the TSR folks. They're they're a professional company, but just barely. I mean, if you look at the kind of very naive, in your garage kind of style of the Three Brown Books, this is not too far afterwards. I should have looked up the publication date. I didn't. I'm not exactly certain, but maybe we'll see some dates in here. An ad for The Battle of the Five Armies by Larry Smith. New and revised edition, $5. 4-color map board, expanded and revised rules, over 150 unit counters in multiple colors. packaged in a Ziploc bag for easy storage. Ah, John Schwartz, thank you. July 1976. Awesome. Thank you for that. Oh, June 1976. Let's see. Do I want to read this? Is this is the publisher's statement? So is that from Tim Kask or is that from Gygax? I'm not exactly sure. But just basically, the dragon rumbles, or how do we get into this, and what are we trying to do now that we're here? This issue marks a major step for TSR Hobbies Inc. With it, we have bid farewell to the safe, secure world of the House Organ and have entered the arena of competitive magazine publishing. We have activated a new division of the corporation, TSR Periodicals. We are soliciting advertisers and giving notice to the rest of the pack that we have arrived with a vengeance, with a mission to fulfill. That mission is to publish the best magazine devoted to sword and sorcery, fantasy, science fiction, and role-playing gaming. It is a newly developed field, and we admit to being only as old as the following. However, we feel that our experience gained from publishing the Strategic Review, the pioneer in the field, will stand us in good stead. But we also make allowance for the fact that as the field grows and expands, demands and needs will change. We actively encourage your suggestions, criticisms, or whatever. We can adequately serve you, the gamer/reader, only if you let us know what you like/want. We plan to include gaming, variants, discussion, fiction by authors both known and unknown, reviews of interest to our readers, and anything else there is demand for. In the next issue, when we have figured out what we can afford, we will publish our rates for articles and art. Submissions must be, okay, I'll pass the, hey, if you want to submit to a 40-plus-year-old magazine, okay, we'll skip the rest of that, but there we go. They're here. Terrence says the Dragon Manifesto, something like that. But, if you want the manifesto, you're going to have to send in your own self-addressed stamped envelope. That's probably something that people, I don't even know how old you have to be at this point to remember that SASE, self-addressed stamp envelope. It used to be a big thing, very much pre-internet. If you wanted something and you wanted something and you wanted a response returned to you in some way, so not just you're sending out a letter, that's just a one-way communication, but you're sending out something and you wish to have something back, you'd have to send your own envelope back with it. Self-addressed and stamped. You'd put it in whatever your other communication were, and then, of course, if whatever their reply was, whatever you were getting, they would put it back in that envelope and send it back to you. So it was critically important in those times where it wasn't just an email or something to have a properly formatted and stamped self-addressed envelope. Hey, Pokebalonza. I think I got that right. Howdy, welcome. Fritz Lieber is known for his excellent writing. Soon he'll be known for the game he and Harry Fisher have created, Lankmar. I'm not sure. I mean, yes, I suppose the game of Lankmar is there, but I think he's a little bit better known for Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, just a touch. Continue. Let me see. How long is this one? Should I try this one? I'm going to skip this one for now. Maybe we'll come back to it. I want to kind of get more into. I'm less interested in the kind of fiction stuff than but this maybe has some. Maybe I will resume this because it seems this has some kind of setting info which might be good. Hey, Ovaltine Patrol. Once again, going to be on the road for the stream. Well, stay on the road, Ovaltine Patrol. Just put us on audio and. Hopefully, you've got some kind of Bluetooth audio phone thing set up. You can keep us on your stereo speakers, but your eyes on the road, please. Eyes on the road. Oh, yes, Terrence does point out Fritz Lieber, also known for his very prolific drinking. Yep, he was. Okay, so here, we will read some of this. I've changed my mind yet again. I tried to explain to Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser about wargamers in the game of Lankmar. You mean they're using our territory to fight in? The Mouser demanded. We ought to charge him toll or tariff, ambushing those who refuse to pay. I tried some more. Oh, so they fight only with their minds, Fafhrd said. That sounds sick to me. I keep my mind solely for enshrining the images of beautiful women. A sort of a penny peep show, eh? The Mouser observed to him. Fricks and their tricks, etc. Say rather a temple, Fafhrd replied decorously, with admirable self-control. But about these wargamers or mind fighters, the mouser said, turning back to me. I'll wager some of them aren't above using a real knife under the table, especially if the game goes against them. A man could keep on playing a table game, though hamstrung, Fafhrd put in. Still, it would probably upset his judgment, don't you think? The mouser pointed out to him. I kept on trying, explaining that the wargamers wanted to know about the geography and terrains of the world of Nuon, and which Earth soldiers most resembled in weapons and tactics the warriors of the various chief lands of Lankmar. At one time, the mouser wanted me to call in Karl Truhers, suggesting that being a German and inevitably scholarly, he had probably written an encyclopedia of Nuon to match his Lankmarese to German Lankmarese dictionary. Karl was the third German, or person of any sort, excluding some of the devourers and the pryings of Alex the Picklock, to have penetrated Nuon. The other being myself and Harry Otto Fisher, widely revered inventor of the two characters. Truhurst's adventures are in The Swords of Lankmar, but I persevered and we finally agreed on the following points. Of course, data about my own books in English I had to supply mostly by myself. All Nuon lands that I've been told of use the sword, spear, bow, and sling. The Lankmarts relied chiefly on the spear or pike, along with the sword, of course, and prefer the sling to the bow. They may be likened to the Romans, or be thought of as, if I may use such a term, southern medievals. The men of the 8 cities like the spear too, but favor the bow. They're like Germans, Swedes, or, again, northern medievals. As for the eastern lands, think of Saracens, Arabs, Parthians, Assyrians even. They ride the camel and elephant and use the bow extensively. Mingols, unsurprisingly, are much like Mongols, the swift squadrons of Genghis Khan or Tamerlane. The horse, of course, and the bow above all other weapons. While the northern mercenaries use spear and sword exclusively, Quarmalians make that the sword and sling. The only map of Nuon I know of, most reliable in its central and southern bottom portions, was first sketched out and drawn by Martha McElroy, Mrs. Harry Fisher, redrawn by another of Amra, and that redrawing reproduced, somewhat simplified, in the Ace, The Swords of Lankmar, and in the French and German translations, where the cold waste becomes Desert Froids and Ice Ode, or Désert Froid, I should say in the French, and Ice Ode, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, respectively. This shows only a section of the northern hemisphere, showing longitudinally about 1/6 of the circumference of the planet, or globular vacuity, and going from the North Pole no farther south than the northern tropic, exactly where Klesh is, one asks in vain. It must be remembered that I know no more of Nuon than I have put into my stories. There are no secret volumes of history, geography, etc., written before the tales themselves were spun. I rely wholly on what Fafhrd and the mouser have told me, testing them against each other and sifting out exaggerations and lies when I must. And while my conferences with the twain have been rewarding, they've also been fewer than I'd wish. I have handled no little books of Ningauble or scrolls or Srith. For the lands east of the Sea of Monsters, much can be discovered from the stories written since the map was drawn. Much can be especially discovered from the tales The Circle Curse, in Swords Against Death, as published by Ace, of course, as have been all 5 sword books, and Trapped in the Shadowland, in the year's best fantasy stories, edited by Lynn Carter, DAW, newly published. The Shadowland, abode of death, and said to contain what some call Nuon's death pole, lies east of the Sea of Monsters. Beyond it, still farther east, is the strange land of the Ivamorensi, where mankind and domestic animal kind are alike hairless, but whether this betokens an advanced civilization or decadence only, I know not. At the antipodes from the Shadowlands, somewhere in the otherwise unknown southern continent, there is said to lie Godsland, abode and paradise of at least some, but perhaps not all, of the gods of Nuon, and containing the world's life pole, distinct, of course, from its rotational pole, just as with Earth's rotational and magnetic poles. Evidence for this is found in the story Under the Thumbs of the Gods, to date published only in the April 1975 issue of the magazine Fantastic, a treasure house of D&D material. Add that to the list. Let's track down April 1975 Fantastic. In my newly published DAW, or I don't know if that's supposed to be DAR DAW, September 1975 book, the second book of Fritz Lieber, there is a Fafhrd Mouser story of some length, Trapped in the Sea of Stars. In it, the twain seek to sail to the southern continents, and encountering the great equatorial current fail in their attempt, but appear to make some astonishing discoveries about the astronomy of Lankmar. And in the soon-to-be-published Flashing Swords No. 3, edited by Lane Carter, Dell, there is a sizable Fafhrd Mouser novelette, The Frost Monstream, launching a new cycle of their adventures. In it, we learn of Rime Isle, a large northern island in the outer sea, inhabited by men who appear to be of Fafhr's breed, at least as to size, and situated due west of the Claws and due north of Simorgia, for which see the Sunken Land in Swords Against Death. As I regretfully parted from the twain, somewhere in the caverns of Ningauble, of course, for they're the only place I know of where Nuon and the other worlds link, see Adept's Gambit in Swords in the Mist, Fafhrd remarked, "Don't forget Stardock when you write for these wargamers, a whole vast dungeon inside Nuon's mightiest mountain, with routes both on the mountain and inside it." Better yet, Quarmal, and not half as chilly, the Mouser in eagerly. A vast underground world of many levels, a nation in the mines. There's a dungeon would send wargamers ape. They were referring to subworlds of Nuon described in Swords Against Wizardry. Taking from them, I called back, reciting the following. A proposal for an additional piece at Lankmar. The woman rather, each player has also a Uri. Weapons, each player has also 2 daggers. Moves, powers, and interactions. An Uri has 6 movement points. An enemy soldier 3 or fewer spaces from an Uri must move directly toward her. If in range of 2 or more Uris, he must move toward the nearest, whether enemy or friend. If equidistant from 2 or more Huris, he may not move at all. A hero 3 or fewer squares from an enemy Huri has his powers halved, but he may move as he will. A Huri may wield only a dagger, though she may carry other weapons. A dagger has the same range as a sword, but can kill only a Huri or a hero. A Huri may be killed only by a hero or another Huri. During my recitation, I had been moving away from them, already caught in the time eddy that would, alas, irresistibly carry me back to my own world and, typewriter. Fafhrd shouted faintly, "Are Huris slimly beautiful?" "So much so," I yelled back, "that they make all men in their helpless slaves and intoxicate even a hero to madness." "I don't like the idea," came the Mouser's ghostly shout. "Women are ever treacherous and complicate any game to the point of sheerest insanity." "That's the idea," I bellowed back. I caught only one more shout, from Fafhrd I think it was. "What color is a Huri's hair?" Okay, so I think that's the end of the story. Certainly an interesting thing. Let's see. Terrence says, Mindfighters is how they should have sold psionics. It is certainly a cool name. Subtweeting the Silmarillion. I don't know if I could do that. I don't know how long it would take if I was just going to say, all right, let's read through the Silmarillion. And I got to imagine that the Tolkien, whatever the Tolkien Trust is or whatever controls that, probably wouldn't take kindly to that. All right, so that was a story. I don't know what Huris are. Someone can tell me what Huris are. I don't recall them. I've read some of the Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser stuff, most of it, I think, but not lately. But that was, I guess, in a sense, a little bit so I guess it's kind of interesting, right? If we look at what that is, it's a bit of an advertisement for this upcoming Lankmar game, which I think I have, actually. I should have, if I had done some research in advance, I could have pulled the box out. I think I have the Lankmar they're referring to. I have a version of that, I think, or it's a similar one. And so you got the kind of fiction. We've got a bit of an advertisement, but then also snuck in there some nice setting stuff for folks who can use it as a bit of a reference for different parts of Nuon and where they could be found in the different stories, which was interesting too. Is it wasn't giving you, I mean, it gave you a little bit of, okay, here are the weapons and things that they like, but other than that, it just essentially is almost an index to, hey, you want to learn about these things? Go check out this story. If you want to learn about this stuff, go to that story. It's kind of fun. I mean, it's kind of a reminder of the time we're in, right? We're way pre-internet and things in which that's kind of how you had to roll. You could take this though and then head to your library and pull up different things or a bookstore or whatever you have and find these issues of magazines or stories and books and then look them up. See if you have them already, see if your friends got them, and share them around. What else have we got? So we have some stuff on the Battle of Five Armies in miniature. I don't think it looks like it applies to chainmail. Oh, this is how to convert the Battle of Five Armies game into a miniature war game. They're using the chainmail rules, which I actually happen to have. just so happens, because I've been looking at it a lot lately. There's my chainmail. So what do we got here? I'm just curious. I'm really only just going to breeze through this. I'm just kind of curious about some of the different, what I don't want to say denominations, but specifications for different troops. So the Goblins, Bolg, who is, I guess, the enemy hero, fights as 4 heavy foot. And then his bodyguards fight as 2 heavy feet, and then 375 goblins are all heavy foot soldiers, and their warriors are also heavy foot. Interesting, they're heavy foot and not horse. I might have thought, oh, they do. No, they also defend as heavy foot. So they fight as 4 heavy foot, and then well, I guess depending on, so everything's fighting as heavy foot soldiers, and they're all defending as some of them heavy, some of them light, and some of them armored. The progression in terms of best to worst as far as foot is armored foot first, heavy foot second, then light foot last. And then the same for horse. It goes, well, except it goes heavy, medium, light. So we can kind of see Thorin's heavy, fights as heavy, attacks as heavy, defends as armored. The company is basically the same. Looks like they're all pretty much even, except for maybe the bodyguard. Well, they also have Dane. But of course, there's only 25 dwarves. Elves, we have men. Gandalf fights as 2 armored foot. So he's the most. Oh, Bjorn. Bjorn starts as 4 armored foot, then changes to 8 armored foot, and the Eagles fight as light horse. Bilbo with the ring and sting fights as a light foot, but then defends as an armored foot. But he has to be visible to attack. It's kind of cool. Taryn said, nerds are so quixotic. Let's simulate the most famously off-screen battle in literature. Well, why not? I mean, that's kind of the fun thing, is you want to test it, right? Yeah, because we don't get it in the books. So it is interesting. I'd be curious to know, maybe we'll see in further episodes of Dragon that people write back, hey, okay, we converted this and run it, and 9 times out of 10, the Fellowship loses, or the Free Peoples lose. After the 10th turn, Gandalf may fire 1 fireball only. He has no other magic that he can use. The goblins can ride the wargs on a 1-to-1. In doing so, they minus 3 inches off their movement rate. This we get, but that's the one unfortunate thing with the magazine, is the layout with stuff bouncing around means that's all for now on that. Maybe I'll jump down. Actually, no, I'll follow it because that makes more sense. 13. Let's see. The magic swords that Gandalf and Thorin wield cause the goblins to check morale as if a superhero was in their midst. This action will occur anytime goblins come within 3 inches of the swords. Wow, so it's not even getting into contact. They can't even really come near those swords without having to make a morale check, which is interesting for magic swords. That's a cool idea to think about, is that I normally don't think about. I can't say that I've usually thought much at all of the morale effects of having a magic sword. And I mean, in terms of, well, I've got this sword, what does it do to the enemies? What does it do to conceivably to your allies? But this is really interesting. This is getting it at 3 inches means you're not even engaged necessarily. You're just kind of getting closer to engaging. It would be kind of a cool thing to think about if there was a radius to the effect of magic swords and some things that would have morale changes, positive to the people who are on your side, negative to the creatures who are against you, and see how that works. I mean, it's, the only thing I would say is it becomes a lot to keep track of. I think the negative would be, I mean, in D&D regular, where everyone after a while is going to have magic swords and magic things, then you kind of think like, how many of these things am I rolling, or how am I determining this without it being a bore? So maybe it's something that would work best in a situation like where there's only a couple of swords. In this case, because you're moving units on the map, you don't have to worry about, mostly, I guess, Gandalf and Thorin being like next to each other and just bullying people around. Though I suppose you could, if you were the Free Peoples player, maybe you want to make a super team of putting Gandalf and Thorin together and having them just rampage across the field using their sword to wreak havoc to the enemy's formations. But it's an interesting idea. It'd be nice to think more about that. Maybe you could just do a rule that only the most powerful sword within a certain radius would have effect. So if you've got a +2 sword and everyone else has +1 swords, you only get that +2 sword, and the other one's just, they're lost. The more powerful sword gets an aura. And then if somebody on your competitive side had a +3 mace or something, then that would even take precedence. That might be something to think about. All right, if players wish, they can use the man-to-man combat tables, and then we get some stuff for that. One final note. If anything is unclear to you, please feel free to write me. That's probably, yeah, that's a sign of the times. I don't think we'd be saying that so easy this time. All right, now let's get on something. How to use non-prime requisite character attributes. Here we go. I feel like this is a little bit kind of Reddit read-along, but it's kind of where I'm sort of picking and choosing through the magazine to find good stuff to read. This was written by Wesley D. Ives. Whenever a player performs a non-ordinary task or attempts to do so, the referee is usually in a quandary: how to determine fairly whether the character can perform the attempted action. Normally, the referee gives consideration to the player's attributes and then more or less wings it, attempting to be fair, usually giving the player a percentage chance of success. A more standardized system is needed, and the following guidelines should help considerably. All right, so this is a little bit different, right? Because I think by the time you get to BX, maybe they would default to having roll under attribute as your primary way to decide it, as opposed to going straight to percentage. If you recall from the DM advice in the BX set, it says, hey, you can go from roll under attribute all the way to percentage or percentile, but percentage is usually the last chance. If nothing else works, then go to percentage. But when these other ones work, feel free to use them. This is at least suggesting that prior to that people were going straight to percentage. And I didn't play Zero Edition prior to BX. I didn't play D&D prior to BX, so I don't know myself. If anybody knows or how they did it back in the day, feel free to let me know. But this is kind of positing that, hey, if you're going just kind of to percentage, maybe we're going to add something to try first. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. So whenever a player attempts some action which would tax his ability in any attribute, first we're going to generate a number from 1 to 100 and consult the table below. Okay, so first we're going to roll a die, basically. Hey, Dave Mills, what's up? We're going to roll a die, get somewhere from 1 to 100. Always add the score in question to the 1 and 100 number achieved. Always add the score in question. I'm guessing that's the attribute we're looking at. So maybe better to, okay, well, we'll have an example further down. So we're going to roll, we get a table. Depending on what we roll, then we get a 4-sided, 6-sided, 8-sided, 10-sided, or 12-sided die. Then we use that die type. We're going to generate a number and multiply this number by the amount of the attribute being tested. This number is the percent chance of success. So ultimately, we're still going to be rolling a percentage, but this is now, I guess really the crux of this is not to use percentage, but basically how to arrive at your percentage, which actually is not a bad thought. So here's an example. Consider Grodd the Fighter. His scores are Strength 17, Intelligence 9, Wisdom 5, Constitution 14, Dexterity 14, Charisma 12. Grodd's party has been attacked by a pair of bugbears. Grodd wants 3 of his minions to hold off the bugbears while Grodd rolls away from the boulder, blocking the exit to the dungeon. So, will the minions fight? Oh, this is a good one. Will the minions fight? Let us see. Now we're going to roll some dice. 42. Roll the 42. We add it to Grodd's charisma. 12, so we get 54. 54, we're still in that 41 to 60 range, so we're going to get an 8-sided die. Then we roll that 8-sided die, and we score a 7. Therefore, there's a 7 times 12, or 84% chance that the minions will fight. Wow. Oh. All right, this is some good crunch in here, boy. We talk about not wanting to, people not wanting to use their calculators. There's some calculations going on in here. So we're rolling a die to get another die to then multiply that die by the attribute and then figuring out No, nothing says, is it me or is this a crazy system? It's a little bit, I mean, it seems fun. I like the fact the numbers that it came up with, but you gotta wonder, I mean, clearly they did not have anydice.com at the time to check into, to look at, is there a way where you could take this stuff and and just kind of drill down. I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to give some kind of scaling or sort of rolling percentages, but in a way, right? So that if you roll high on the initial roll, you get kind of a better chance of getting higher results, but you still get the full band because it's 12-sided die. It's not that you couldn't get a 1, you're just as likely to get higher than 10, which would be a higher than 100% chance, which I guess would just be an auto success. 10-sided die, 8-sided die, doing all the stuff. But yeah, it's a lot of, boy, get out your calculators or your abacuses and start going to work. And Terrence, yes, I did make a Jerry Clower noise. I didn't think anyone would get that particular reference, but yes, I did, Terrence. You roll a dice to get a percentage you have to roll again. Pretty much, yeah. You're rolling one die, adding it to an attribute score, using that to figure out a second die, rolling that, multiplying that by your charisma score to then get to a final number that you are going to have to then roll percentage against. A lot going on there. So now we get to, how about this boulder? Again, we're rolling a dice. This time we get 66. We add it to Grod's strength of 17. We get an 83. That gives us a 12-sided die, but he only rolls 3. So 3 times 17, we get a 51% chance to be able to move the boulder away. I mean, on the one hand, I'm kind of digging the numbers they're getting out of it. But on the other hand, I wish I got to figure that if we threw in, again, this is pre-Excel, let's just throw it in Google spreadsheets and just start messing around with numbers. I feel like that there's probably a way that we could do it now and get some of this stuff without having to do 3 or 4 rolls. Ryan Smith, this is the hell, the madness is Dragon number 1. People, I think it's going to be interesting in these early Dragon magazines, maybe even not so early Dragon magazines, people essentially trying to come up with stuff. Now we have so many mechanics and so many things that we have access to, where we could go to a forum and say, what about this? And someone will say, oh, this other game did this, or what about that, right? These guys they're coming up with stuff kind of in isolation. Certainly they don't have a internet type thing to have recourse to. So they're kind of just coming up with stuff. And I kind of dig what they're getting out of it, but yeah, I just think, boy, there's gotta be a better way to get in there. Terrence says, creaky wargaming, that time forgot. Maybe. Now we have a thing special for fighters. Fighters with extraordinary strength use the following table in order to make their scores compatible. I love the idea of extraordinary strength, but I don't really like it. It just adds just a whole other layer of, I don't remember what the reason is for it. I just think we could have done without it. Brian Smith says, these dudes are basically computer programming, in my mind anyway. Pretty much. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you could see doing now, because you could just roll 20, or you could put it in a dice bot, and you could just say, okay, now, calculate, and you could run through all this stuff. But yeah, we're talking, these guys are doing it in the middle of a combat or in the middle of a situation at their table, pulling out their slide rules and doing this stuff. Which on the one hand is impressive, but then you think, man, is it really worth it when I could have just probably ballparked? Okay, they have a strength of 17, so they have an 83% chance. Something like that. But, they're trying to widen the ranges. Because you could have just said, okay, take 60, add 17 to it, and that's it. But then you think, well, maybe that doesn't make enough percentage. So I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep as much as possible the full range, but also the full range of potential results, but also add in the fact that, okay, some people are strong and some are not, and then they're doing all that. But yeah, it's taking quite a few steps. And then we do have a little breakdown of which attributes to use for what. I'm kind of curious. So we get strength. Okay, that's obvious. So intelligence, he mentions discovering proper method of operating all mechanical devices, including all magical devices, discerning patterns, deducing cause and effect, recognizing types of layers, learning new languages and skills. And then wisdom is for divining, quote unquote, correct path of action, recognizing functions of devices. So that may be an interesting thing is how they're differentiating wisdom intelligence, which is another thing that is constantly people go back and forth about what stuff is kind of wisdom versus intelligence. So that's an interesting way of demarking those two attributes. And I think constitution and dexterity are pretty obvious, and so is charisma. Then there's modifiers per level. Add the increase in hit probability to their attribute score. Using this rule, Grodd, being a Myrmidon, would have added 4 to his charisma and strength before multiplying them by the die number. So they're using there to hit their attack bonus, which is interesting, not their level. So this is kind of interesting too, because it definitely will favor fighters or favor anybody who's got the most attack. It kind of is a little bit of you're reframing what that attack, that hit probability is, which is sort of interesting. And then we have some modifiers per character type. Everyone should have the chance, for instance, of picking a lock. But since their only thieves are specialists and all others should have only their dexterity as the percent chance of success. Grodd's chances would then be 14%. If using the level modifier, 18%. For activities further from the character type's bailiwick, begin dividing the required number and multiplying the chance of backfire. For instance, Grodd attempts to operate a sensor of air elementals, normally usable only by magic users. There is a normal chance that Grodd would know what it is, but to use it, he would need to roll a 2%, Grodd's intelligence divided by 4, and there would be likewise only a 2% chance of maintaining control over the elemental once it was called out. Using the level modifiers, Grodd's chances would be increased to 3%, still not a very healthy set of odds. The character is attempting to learn a spell. First, subtract the level of the spell from his percentage chance. That percentage is also the chance of not going insane upon failure. Now, that's really interesting. That is kind of super interesting because here they're basically saying, we talk about people hated the thieves because the thieves took something that everybody was doing and made it a specialty. But here they're saying, well, look, if you want, you can have anybody try anything, which I mean is the idea anyway, but even including stuff like magic items, magic spells, anything, but their chances of doing so are going to just plummet based upon them not being a member of that class. So sure, hey, you're the fighter, you want to try to use that magic item, go for it, but your chances of success are brutally low. And whatever backfires might be, like it driving you insane, might be super high. But hey, give it a shot, which is really interesting. And I kind of like it. It's a very open-ended way of looking at it. I feel like this could probably be this idea could be, if we're looking at how we're going to take things, like we want to take skills and if we wanted to bolt on sort of a skill or ability type system, it might be an interesting way to think about it. If we think about it like, okay, it's not just that it's like wizards have this thing of doing it, but then what does that mean for non-wizards? Like wizards are we're looking at everybody as sense as a specialist, and then the other folks are generalists. So if you're a fighter, you're a combat specialist. Everything outside of that, you're a generalist. And maybe we'd say there's some axis where you're absolute opposite of fighter, say magic user. So you're not very good at magic, even for other classes, because you're in that wholly opposite domain. And then if you're a cleric, you're kind of close to magic because you have your spells. So maybe it's a little bit easier for you to learn wizard spells. And maybe a wizard you might say has a little bit easier to learning cleric stuff, depending on how you want to talk about divine rituals and how that exists in your game. But then maybe you're really inefficient at, say, thief stuff. But you have these mechanics of, hey, if you're the cleric and you want to try to use what we would now say is a thief specialty action, you can. Here's what it is, right? Like Lamentations, I think just had like 1 in 6, at least for kind of thief stuff when you're not a thief. But this gives a much more nuanced way of figuring that out. But it's just kind of, I don't want to say half-baked, because they haven't really... They kind of just left it up to GM fiat. Oh, okay, misfires, oh, this or that. But there's an interesting seed of an idea there for what it might look like. Let's see. Brian Smith says, I've attempted fixing my car with a 2% chance of succeeding and definitely went insane upon failure. Yes. And then Terrence says, YouTube tutorials are basically the modern Necronomicon. Indeed. So it's an interesting seed of an idea there. I feel like I should bookmark that or come back to it, because if I want to revisit that. Luck stones, blessings, lodestones, and prayer. Luck stones and a clerical bless add 1 to all dice rolled, whereas lodestones subtract 1 from all rolls. A prayer is a lodestone to the other side, and there exist curses which do nothing but subtract 1 to 6 from every subsequent roll or the determination die. Well, that's really interesting. And then everything, everything else, you get the idea. But this kind of luck stones and lodestones and prayers and curses, blesses, that's another great way to integrate blessing into things. Brian Smith says, the last sentence of this page is my favorite. Yep. Yeah, you get the idea. I'm sure he's saying, they gave me 1 page to write this out, and I got 2 columns, and I'm at the bottom. So you're gonna have to deal with that. I got 1 page. I'm done. Oh, here we go. James M. Ward coming in with magic and science. Are they compatible in D&D? I believe it is a real mistake to think that just because there is a world created by D&D type thinking where magic and magical monsters exist, there is no room for technological type devices and all they imply. Many times while discussing rules with other judges and players, I've heard statements like, magic and its uses deny science and its uses. I myself usually loudly clamor that a lightning bolt wand is just a static electricity generator. Or, many magical potions are simply advanced chemical formulae. But my words are usually swept away in the magic tide. In response to this, I created a race of people who had transported their island land, Atlantis, to another nearby dimension. This race, called Artificers, has a high degree of technology and are very aware of magic and have devices to counter any magical effect. I present some of their creations to those who have some players in their game that are too powerful and need a challenge. There are 3 powerful devices used all the time by the Artificers. A handheld weapon much like a small catapult made of unbreakable crystal and spring steel, a mobile blue sphere, and a computer. The pistol shoots a 2-inch sphere for a maximum range of 50 yards. These spheres, only upon being released from the pistol, emit their stored power on contact. There are 6 different types, all color-coded for easy identification. Red sphere. Upon contact, this sphere from the point of contact will emit a 15-foot circle of heat action, so intense that it melts everything and anything in the area. No magic saving throw applicable. Black sphere. Upon contact, this sphere from the point of contact will emit a 15-foot circle of disintegrating damage as the spell, with magic saving throw applicable for anything in the area. Clear sphere. Upon contact, this sphere from the point of contact will emit a 15-foot circle of nullifying energy. This energy will destroy the usefulness of any magic item forever. No magic saving throw applicable. Brown sphere. Upon contact, this sphere from the point of contact will emit an illusion of a vast maze. Those in that 15-foot circle must travel through this mental maze to free themselves of the effects. No magic saving throw applicable. Purple sphere. Upon contact, the sphere from the point of contact will emit a 15-foot circle of death as the spell. Magic saving throw applicable. Finally, silver sphere. Upon contact, this sphere from the point of contact will emit a wall of synthetic crystal with the resistance of a diamond to physical forces. The wall will go to a maximum height of 60 feet, length 120 feet, thickness 10 feet. It will always fill any passages or space to the fullest possible extent. While hand weapons are useful, the normal artificers like their devices to fight for them, and therefore created the blue sphere. This device comes in 3 sizes, the largest sphere having a diameter of 3 feet, the middle sphere having a diameter of 2 feet, and the small sphere having a diameter of 1 foot. These are also badges or rank, since the smallest is the most powerful, and only the highest ranking leaders will use the smallest spheres. These spheres are able to shoot 2 beams while floating beside their master. These beams can be whatever its master needs at the time in the way of attacking or defending abilities. All right, let me just see, because there's some stuff happening in the chat. Let's see. Brian Smith says, my main interest, clamoring loudly about magic wands. Indeed. And then also says, a beholder with these effects on its eye rays would be pretty dang cool, actually. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the Artificer. If we want to go back and talk about where Artificers came from, I guess I would imagine this must be it. I mean, these are Artificers, capital A. They match up with the 5th edition Artificers just in terms of being technology-based, device-based. Of course, these are much more powerful, and it seems clear they're meant as opponents, NPCs, and not player characters. But, as Gygax says in Men in Magic, you should be able to adapt anything to a player class. So we have some, let's see, these are the beams, I guess, of the spheres. We have the largest sphere, the middle sphere, and the small sphere. The largest sphere has a 10 hit point damage absorber, a heat ray. I'm guessing that drains the 10 hit point damage absorber must just drain 10 hit points from its target, I'm guessing. A 3-die heat ray, a healing ray, 3 points per melee round, a displacer ray, and a 20-point damage shield. The middle sphere has a 15 hit point damage absorber, or maybe maybe I'm reading that wrong. All right, let me see. I think I am. Okay, so the damage absorber takes the damage potential from a spell or weapon from its master if the ray is trained on the artificer at the instance of the damage occurrence, with the limitation of only being able to take a maximum stated amount per melee turn. Yeah, so it's not offensive, it's defensive. So you have the largest sphere. You have that damage absorber beam trained on you, its master artificer. When you get hit with an attack, it takes 10 hit points off that attack. The middle sphere takes 15 hit points, has a heat ray, stronger heat ray, has a stronger healing ray. Same displacer ray, has a stronger shield, has an anti-magic shell, and a fear ray. Then the small sphere can absorb 20 hit points, has an even stronger heat ray, has a restoration ray, has a displacer ray, has a stronger still shield, also has the anti-magic shell, also has a fear ray, and adds to them an anti-sphere ray. So you could have sphere on sphere combat and a charm monster ray. I'm going to skip the descriptions since I think they're, other than the damage absorber, I think they're fairly self-explanatory. The best way to negate a blue sphere is to place it in an anti-magic shell, which will cut off its energy supply. When this happens, the sphere becomes useless forever. Finally, the most powerful of all the devices of the artificers is their mighty offensive and defensive analogic computer. Okay, we got to go to page 10. The device has a heat core power source and is able to analyze and counteract any spell sent at it. It is able to analyze up to 100 spells sent at it. Its primary form of attack is to analyze the hit points of its enemies and emit a double amount heat ray. These are used in the more sensitive areas of artificer strongholds. The computer's greatest weakness is its strict following of its program, which can allow more intelligent beings to use logic to get around it. The possibilities and limitations of such a device should be obvious. This type device can be made in varying strengths and forms and present an unusual obstacle for the wargamer. The reader will, I am sure, note that while the above is in a scientific vein, its use can easily be put in a D&D campaign. Science does not have to be dull when a little imagination is applied. May the tide of magical refutation not drown out these small words. All right, so that was James M. Ward. Maybe the Artificer, the template of the modern Artificer in a sense. I don't know. It'd be interesting to look back and see kind of where that Artificer idea came from, but certainly this seems like a very early attempt at bringing in kind of a magitech sort of creature into D&D. At least in a quasi-official way, given that it's in the magazine. Brian Smith says, Eberron, where's your blue sphere launching artificers? Indeed. Is that where it was? Was that the first setting to have artificers? Was it an Eberron thing? I played in Eberron only the briefest of times. I think I might have owned one of the books at some point, but I don't know if I still have it. Languages. Or could you repeat that in Old Wormish by Lee Gold? Lee Gold's the editor of Alarms and Excursions, the D&D Amateur Press Association. I know people have mentioned, I've seen mention of things, some interesting stuff in Alarms and Excursions, but I don't have any of those, so I'm going to have to try to track them down. Hey, Walking the Path, glad you could join it. Now, Nothing says, it's weird when people say it doesn't have to be magic, it can be science, but then the system is just magic with science words. No thought given to physics or metallurgy or any actual science. Well, I think it's, it's fun. It's fun science because most of us are not metallurgists and most of us don't really know in detail the physics. So you kind of get close enough. I think it's just the idea that it doesn't have to be a spell. It can have quasi-mechanical or, physical kind of things, But yes, I mean, ultimately, that artificer that we just read through, it's pretty much just magic. It's doing magic, quasi-magic stuff. All its abilities are defined in basically magic ways with the beams and things. But the fact that it isn't magic means that there might be some interesting ways to deal with it. Though, of course, it's funny that how you want to destroy one of those spheres is put it in an anti-magic shell. So, that was a curious thing. It might have been interesting to have something different so that if you had some, like you had a party, you had some kind of anti-magic shell spell, but they might have to figure out what other spell works. So you have to cut it off in some other way, maybe some kind of anti-electricity, some spell to kind of dampen electrical fields or magnetic fields or something similar might do the trick instead of just ye old anti-magic shell. But people are trying. It's early. Let me get back to this one. Languages, or could you repeat that in Old Wormish by Lee Gold, editor of Alarms and Excursions? The rules lay down that each species has its own language, except for humans, most of whom can speak Common, as can 20% of the non-humans, as an extra tongue. In addition, each alignment has its own language, known to all its members, and recognizable as such by all non-members. Creatures may speak several languages, either by virtue of their natural intelligence or by magic. Thus, an elf with an intelligence of 18 speaks 6 native languages, or Hobgoblin, Gnoll, Elf, Common, and his alignment, plus 8 acquired ones, 1 for each intelligence point over 10. While a human with an intelligence of 3 can speak only Common and his alignment language, and probably has a low vocabulary in both. Magic is useful in extending one's language ability. A cleric can acquire the ability to speak the language of any animal, and a first-level spell has been proposed that would allow a third-level thief or any magic user taking it to speak any language in which he had found an inscription that he could read. The thief has an 80% chance to read languages. The magic user would have to carry the Read Languages spell in order to succeed. Extra languages may also be acquired as a divine or magical favor. There's one San Francisco area mule who now speaks Japanese as a favor from a monkey god, so that he could communicate with his 9 intelligence Japanese-speaking master. And one of my own dumb clerics was given the ability to speak Where St. Bernard as a gift from a rather eccentric wizard. He hasn't found anyone else who speaks it yet, let alone Where St. Bernard, but he's still looking. So much for what the rules provide for. What are the implications of all this for D&D play? To begin with, let us take up the question of alignment languages. Some groups have allowed characters to take an alien alignment language as a tongue learned by virtue of high intelligence. I myself feel that the world view of each alignment is so different from the others that speaking an alien alignment would be impossible to do perfectly and difficult to do well. In my dungeons, lawfuls or chaotics have only a 30% chance of understanding anything in the opposing tongue and a 60% chance of understanding anything in neutral. They can speak the opposing tongue 40% understandably and neutral 70%. Neutrals have a 60% chance of understanding either law or chaos and a 70% chance of speaking it understandably. How far does language ability go? One can talk to animals. One can talk to plants. Can one talk to bugs? Insects smaller than a grasshopper, say. Can one talk to bacteria? Stones? I have encountered one character who took wall as a language and attempted to interrogate dungeon walls as to what lay behind them. In my dungeon, the walls drunkenly replied, "I don't know. I'm plastered." I feel that anything for which a command, potion, ring, staff, wand, rod does not exist should not be able to carry on a conversation. To what extent are there meta-languages, the non-human equivalent of common? Can a mule understand a horse? Can a unicorn? I use an equine tongue, 70% understandable and speakable by horses, 70% by mules, to whom it sounds very aristocratic, 50% by unicorns. Similarly, there is an Old Wormish spoken by 50% of all middle-aged or older dragons who are up to speaking any language, and the Great Tongue, spoken by 50% of all giants well enough established in the community to have a lair to live in. I also play that lycanthropes have an 80% chance of understanding common, though they cannot speak it in were form, and a 40% chance of understanding the language of the species they resemble in were form, though they cannot speak it when in human form. Thus, there was a 40% chance a werewolf would speak wolf, and if he does so, a 70% chance he would also speak canine. Can one change a language taken as an IQ ability fringe benefit? Many groups will not. Some, however, allow an individual to learn one new language and forget one old acquired one each time he goes up a level. This seems reasonable. First level character has more need to speak Goblin than Red Dragon. A 7th level one, the reverse. Languages can sometimes be used for other reasons than communication. I once encountered a fighter who had taken Balrog as a language, for the purpose of swearing in it when annoyed. I also met 2 characters who used to exchange what appeared to be snide comments on the rest of the party in Minotaur, a language none of the rest of us spoke. The usual use of language, though, is to communicate. This is an especially vital skill to the spellcaster. potion or device of commanding apparently carries the language to the class of entities to be put under control, but the standard spells do not. Little use can be made of a charmed or held enemy if there's no way to give him orders or interrogate him, save through sign language. And mute phantasmal beings are always less convincing than vocal ones. The ability to speak to the party's mule, or to a character's own mount may also be a valuable one at times. It is far easier to calm such an animal if you speak its language. Learning mule can be a far cheaper way of inspiring a pack animal not to run away the first time it meets undead than having to spend 250 gold pieces for training it, or 150 gold pieces for buying barding for it, so it won't feel so vulnerable. Finally, let us look at the common tongue. As mentioned before, the rules lay down most humans and some 20% other creatures and monsters know it. I doubt if they speak it with the same accent or even quite the same grammar or vocabulary. West Coast fans play that most humans also have some other languages of their own, the one of their particular native culture. It may be a current tongue such as Japanese or French or English. It may be a subspecies like Neanderthal or Merman. It may be a tongue from legend or from some fantasy or science fiction work such as Atlantean or Lankmarian or Gorian. It may be a tongue from some geographical source like High Martian or Swampish or Shastan. Such people also speak common, of course. Still, dungeon-dwelling humans are apt to think in their personal tongues rather than in common, an important point for would-be telepathic eavesdroppers to keep in mind. Such personal tongues can be used to make your human character more individualized, always a good thing to strive for. Sometimes such a language characterization can pay off too. I was once in a party that encountered a formidable group of Morlocks. We resigned ourselves to a battle that would surely kill off most of us. But our leader, a caveman cleric of great charisma, found to her delight that she could communicate with the Morlocks in Cavish. It turned out that they were 60% mutually comprehensible. Enough for her to learn that they were neutrals, trekking down to a lower level of the dungeon and willing to leave us alone if we paid them a tribute of all the wine we were carrying. We paid them with delight and then went off to loot creatures we were more on par with. Whew. There we go. Let's see the chat. Brian Smith says there's a good bit in there about his player taking wall as a language. Yes, that was very... I mean, I'm sure someone would occur to someone today, and it occurred to them back then. Hey, if I speak wall, can you just tell me what's behind you? That's great. I mean, just for the stories that kind of come out, that they just mentions, just drops in there, are great. I think the idea in general, though, of having all these different interconnecting languages is fascinating. I never thought of I thought of alignment languages pretty much always as being just in hyper, what's the word I'm talking about? Just really oppositional to each other. So that's something law and chaos talking or listening to them, because in the white box, they mentioned that essentially something of chaos, here's the law language. It just goes into a frenzy. So I just thought, even if I'm not going to play that particular aspect of it, the idea they're really so opposed that no creature's going to know some of both of them. They clearly are treating it in this article like it's much more of a normal language and not, it doesn't have any kind of spiritual presence. I really like the idea of having this kind of cascade of languages. Okay, if you speak mule, then you might, the mule might know a little bit of horse, might know a little bit of general equine. Really great. And I could see creating a whole tree of these languages. And of course, once you have that kind of tree, you're going to want to use it, which gives you just great inspiration for, well, what are we going to do with all these languages? How are people going to interface with them? Do we want to play the kind of game that anybody can take those languages? So maybe someone could take horse. Maybe you might say, as a druid, for example, you could say you could pick particular animal languages, or as a ranger, maybe that could be a ranger thing. Hey, you can pick up animal languages. Really cool stuff. I like the idea that there might be Cavish, which applies to both cavemen and Morlocks as sort of a subdivider of, subspecies or related species to cavemen. Really cool stuff. The percentages are always just kind of fun because they're really interesting. Of course, they add that extra die rolls, extra math you might have to do. 70% chance of this and a 50% chance of that and a 40% chance of that. Of course, now we can automate so much of that stuff that maybe it doesn't even matter so much. But conceptually, it's great. I really like that a lot. Let's see. Brian Smith says, I feel like a multitude of languages is definitely not commonly used in 5e games. It's pretty much like a set list, or so it seems. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I wouldn't even say limited to 5e games. I think I would even say most of the games that I've been around are really just you have your species languages for the ones at least that you're going to interface with. So, yeah, Draconic and Goblin and Orcish and that kind of thing. And then, Common for basically is kind of human language and not so much past that. And certainly I think we don't think much of if different animals have different animal languages usually. So it's really fascinating to think about it. Brian Smith also says, it seems like the speak to X spells are avoided because they seem like barely useful, but I can see how if languages are a bit more thought out, it could be really cool. Yeah, I think you could find, if once your party, your players realize this is a thing, much like the person realized, oh, we can have all languages for all kinds of stuff, so can I speak to walls? Can I learn wall? That becomes something. If it's known just on a meta sense that all languages for all these things abound, you might be able to talk to rocks. I think in Lord of the Rings at one point, or in one of the early drafts for that, I want to say that that they specifically have, I think, talking about one of the elves speaking, the rocks speaking and telling the elf like what's going on in the area, or they don't play out the scene narratively, but they talk about how the rocks or the stones told them of something, or the land kind of spoke to them. So you could really have all this stuff, and once that stuff's known, then yeah, I think a lot of people would come up with try to get a lot of clever usage out of it. Absolutely. That was a lot of fun. Let's see, where are we at? Okay, so this one looks like a story. I'm cognizant that I'm running a little bit long, so I'm going to skip the story. We read that already. What is this? What did I run into? Oh, is this more about... Is this more about... what is this for? Combat tables for fantasy miniatures. Is this might be more 5 armies? Is it? Doesn't look like it. Did we miss something that was started on page 14? Let me go back to this table of contents. I don't really have one. Okay. All right, I'm not sure. It's just like a whole bunch of stuff just thrown in. This must be stuff for the Battle of 5 Armies for Chainmail, I'm guessing. So I'm going to skip that stuff. There's that fireball. All right, yeah, I'm pretty sure that must be it. I think. Yes, so that's... And here we get the Boulette. Creature feature, the Boulette, a.k.a. the land shark. Interesting here. We got a number appearing 1 to 2, with the 90% of it being a solo, a lone creature. Armor class -2. Move 14 inches. Hit dice 6 to 11. 5% chance in lair. No treasure. No magic resistance. And I'm guessing these are attacks. So it's got a claws, or yeah, clawed feet. Claws, basically. It's got, 4 to 48 points from its bite. And 3 to 18 points. So 3d6 from the bite and 4d12 for the bite attack. So that is no joke. The text says, thought to be extinct until just recently, this horrifying apparition was crossbred from armadillo and snapping turtle stock. It has the vicious disposition of the turtle with the speed and digging ability of the armadillo. When fully grown, they can dwarf a percheron, being from 9 to 11 feet tall. They are very stupid, making them all the more dangerous and irascible. Their nickname, that of the land shark, is well founded. They have voracious appetites and will eat nearly anything alive or dead. They show a marked preference for horses and mules, however, and have been reported recently marauding horse herds and attacking even the best armored parties for the single purpose of eating the mounts. If hungry enough, they will attack virtually anyone or anything to satiate their ravenous appetite. Indeed, the Boulette seems to exist for the express purpose of feeding. They will not hesitate to attack and eat humans, though they are not overly fond of dwarves. They are loath to come near elves, alive or dead, but prize hobbits second only to horseflesh. They have been known to dig hobbits right out of their burrows. Ooh, that's a grisly image. They can jump up to 8 feet with blinding speed, are masters at stalking silently and nearly impossible to surprise. When fighting, their primary method of attack is with their awesome jaws, said to be capable of biting the largest charger in half. Their claws are also formidable weapons, and when cornered or wounded, they can strike with all 4 feet, though they normally favor the front 2. The Boulette, pronounced boulet, I always forget that because the 2 T's and it's, the French, wouldn't spell it that way. But so I always end up saying boulette when I know it's boulet. Boulet has only 2 semi-vulnerable spots. The eyes are AC4, but very small compared to the overall bulk of the monster. The other is the underside of the hinged portion of their back. The only time this area is exposed is when they raise their crest, something seldom done except in the fiercest of fights. The softer area is AC6, but only about 1.5 feet square. The scales behind their head are highly prized as shields, and their teeth are said to be extremely valuable. They are never found underground. They are very rare, and only mated pairs, if such exist, will share the same territory. No young have ever been sighted. The smallest ever seen are of the 6-die variety. No one knows how or where the young are born or hatched. Interesting. So their AC is -2, but their eyes are AC4. But then, so it's showing that the eyes themselves are, they're vulnerable because they're eyes. They're not armored. But there's not given is how you're supposed to, what the aiming procedure is, because otherwise you would always aim for the eyes since they have a less armor class than the rest of it. So I'm not sure how that's supposed to work. Boulette is their name in mule language. Oh, good idea. Walking the Path says, in my game, the players arrived to a new world. Then they asked if the natives spoke Common. I laughed and said there was no such languages as universal Common. The players were shocked. Ba-dum-bum. Yeah, I've done away with Common in some ways. Though I will say, Walking the Path, I appreciate Common because it always gives that social outlet, or it gives the majority of having most people having a chance to have that social option when confronting intelligent creatures they don't know. And I found that without that, if I didn't give them the opportunity to learn other languages, that it kind of hamstrung them a bit in terms of their options, because if you can't communicate with things, it's hard to reason with them or not end up just in combat. And I know you can get into the whole like sign language and stuff like that, but it's kind of, I just felt like either A, giving them the option to know some of the languages so they have options, that they can pick, knowing like, okay, who are the people who are around here, or the other creatures, and kind of giving them a chance, or having that common. And common could also be, it could be like some kind of combination of sign language and traders' words and things like that, right? It doesn't have to be a whole language like English. It could be like in Blade Runner when they have that kind of street patois that people speak, that's a bunch of languages that maybe they don't all know themselves, but they know in combination to get around. It's a good thing. But I think it's nice having that option that you can at least have a shot to talk to things. Ian says, go for the eyes. Boo the eyes. Yep, indeed. Though, yeah, it's one of those things that, what's the actual procedure for targeting the eyes? Unknown. Hey, we've got new DM listings. My gosh, people putting in, can you imagine? I mean, this now would just be, here are the Discord servers, or here are the Twitter names, but man, you could, Robert Dudley, do you still live in Glendale, Maryland and Warrell Avenue? I kind of hope not, but Paul Jacays, is that basically Janelle Jacays advertising for a game? Man, if that's the same person, I don't remember what Janelle Jacays' name was at that time, but that would have been an amazing game to get into. Hints for D&D Judges, Part 2, The Wilderness. How much do we have here? I'm just going to check the end. Oh, we got the illusion. Just trying to see how much more. All right, we're not too far away. Okay. Hints for D&D Judges, Part 2, The Wilderness by Joe Fisher. Probably one of the main things that keeps D&D judges from turning their games from a good dungeon into an exciting campaign is a lack of a wilderness area. Part 1 of this series helps you enlarge your game with a town or city. This article will enable you to map in the area surrounding to build other cities, baronies, kingdoms, and even whole continents crawling with monsters, treasure, and adventure. And from there, it is a simple step to turn your castle game into a full-fledged campaign. Further information on campaign games will be given in Part 4 of the series. I definitely will have to track down Part 1. This is Dragon number 1, so it can't be in a Dragon. It's got to be maybe in a strategic review. I'll have to do some digging on that. Outdoor maps can be done in several ways, but I will discuss only the 3 used most often. First, there can be just one map made, which only the judge sees. This way, any special areas can be openly marked. Second, again, only one map can be used, but instead it is laid out for the players during each outdoor adventure. This method does involve the problem of how to mark the special sections that the judge doesn't want his players to know about. The easiest way to get around this is to grid off the map, then list the grid coordinates of special regions on a separate sheet of paper. Then when adventurers move in the wilderness, it will be a simple matter to check out whether they have stumbled on something special. The third way is probably the most difficult way, the most interesting way for the players, and the most fun for the judge. It is also the recommended way. That's an editorial comment. It requires 2 maps, one detailed with all the special treasures and areas marked on it for the judge's use, and one vague map where only major geographical features and cities are shown, and not always where the judge's map shows them to be. This map represents what the players know from the slight amount of information they can pick up in the town they are in. For the first attempt, it is best to stay small. Map out a barony or dukedom or an area of equal size. That way the map is detailed. Less ideas are needed for strange areas. Truthfully, how many weird things can you find in the average barony? And more time can be spent on setting up a key for the map. It is best to use colored pencils and hexagon paper on the final draft, but pencil and regular graph paper is alright for planning out the map. Although this is a fantasy game, anything can happen. Stay away from putting swamps on mountaintops and rivers that flow up and down over hills. Considering that the area that you are mapping out isn't probably more than 40 by 40 miles, at least for your first attempt, it will basically be one type of terrain with a few variations. I.e., mapping out a small barony, it is decided that most of the terrain is grasslands with a small river flowing across the map, a few woods and small forests scattered around, and a hilly region that borders the eastern edge of the map, which happens to be the foothills of a range of mountains to the east. Before you can begin to draw your map, you must first decide on several things: scale of the map, elapsed time of one turn, and movement rates for players. Before you start deciding, though, take a look at pages 16 to 17 of Part 3 of Dungeons & Dragons, which gives you basic movement rates and terrain penalties for a 5 miles per hex and 1 turn per day map. From here you can probably calculate your own movement, turn, and scale. Now that you're ready, you can start on the map itself. You should already have the area around your town and the dungeon entrances drawn out. These should be placed near the center of your map. This isn't necessary on larger maps, but for this side, it's good for the player characters to be able to go in one direction some distance before they reach the edge of the map. Now you can begin filling in the rest of the map. If you haven't as yet figured out a color key, the following suggestions might help. Blue, water; light green, grasslands; dark green, woods, forests, etc. Blue-green for swamp; yellow for desert; light brown for hills; dark brown for mountains; red for major roads; orange for minor roads; black, cities, towns, hamlets. And the following symbols could help: triangles for hamlets, squares for towns, circles for cities, crosses for fortresses. In addition, stars of various sizes can symbolize different types of capitals or seats of government, while any of the above circled means a port of that size. When drawing your map, first sketch in major terrain features: rivers, mountain ranges, large lakes, seas and oceans, and so forth. Fill in the empty areas with smaller types of terrain. Then begin placing your large cities, ports, and capitals, and work your way down to the hamlets. Now finish off the map with your road network. Remember, when judging wilderness adventures, use the tables in the beginning of Booklet 2 of D&D for the number of monsters appearing. The wilderness is not a kind of place, except in semi-civilized areas, and players are venturing into it at their own risk. In most cases, only very strong player characters or large parties should be able to enter the wilderness with any sort of chance of surviving. It is true that weak parties can survive in the wilderness, but seldom for any length of time. So this is a good one. You get a nice little basis for starting off creating your hex crawl area. Let's see. So yeah, we get, I like these symbols. I might have to adapt these symbols. I've always been looking for good, simple town symbols, and I usually see circles for walls, but I kind of like the idea that circles will be a port. So you get hamlets as triangles, towns as squares, cities as circles. I think they have some good, that's good, just good advice in here. You know, starting small, putting where the players are going to start basically in the center, and then you can expand out from there, you know, trying to make your map make sense. There's no real random generating part in here. They kind of expect you that you sort of know where you're going to put them. I think one thing that'd be interesting for hex, you know, because one of the things I feel like when you're doing hex maps, you're trying to come up with something from scratch, is do you have an idea of where your hex map is going to be? I kind of tend to think that people do. That people have a concept in their brain of, okay, this is they're going to be on the coast, or they're going to be, not just the coast. Okay. But they're going to, we're, in your mind's eye, you say, okay, we're going to be playing in your ye old coastal town in essentially Britain, right? Your ye old medieval British countryside town where there's going to be a coast, and it's kind of that area, that general geography. Or playing in the frigid north, in some kind of ice and glaciers, or we're going to be sort of in the desert, or we're going to be in the swamps, or we're going to be wherever. So that you don't need just from scratch, like you're starting, like, I don't know where and what kind of terrain we're going to start. But then and so once you have that terrain, it becomes fairly easy to figure out what's going to go in there. Because if you're in a mountain range, we kind of know, I think, for the most part, what goes into a mountain range, what's near to it. Yeah, sure, we know they're probably not going to be a desert high up in the mountains unless that's in that band of terrain. I mean, if you're in kind of the Arctic, yeah, you're not going to have just the swath of hot desert in the top of your mountain range. It's going to be a swath of maybe icy glacial waste kind of thing. So do we need, or is it most valuable to have that some kind of really random generation, or is it more that we need something to help us fill in those details of, okay, we're going to be in this mountainous waste, so what are the kind of terrain stuff that's around here? I don't know. I'm just kind of freeloading, but certainly it's I like the advice they've given. It has practical stuff just in terms of how things you want to think about, but it's not giving you, I think, that we often expect from a lot of hex kind of crawl resources, is to give you things to generate. It's basically giving you a lot of tools to use, but not generators, I guess, if that makes sense. Let's see. Nothing says, it's always interesting reading the guidance given in these early days of the game. Example, great advice in this article. You can use colored pencils. Wow, a wisdom. Water should be blue. Genius. It is, but then, you find people will, you say that, right? We say that like, oh boy, use colored pencils. What I would never have thought about that. But you get, I can't even tell you sometimes the questions that I see come up, people asking stuff that seems like, don't, come on, hello. But it's like, no, people, hey, maybe that's good advice. Oh, really? I can use colored pencils? Because I think part of it is that taking something that seems esoteric or weird. Remember, if you're coming from the wargaming kind of world at this stage of the game, all this stuff probably seems second nature to you. But you're somebody else who might have just gotten this thing and you're into it. It all seems kind of alien. In the same way, when someone looks at someone's beautiful map on Reddit or somewhere or on Instagram, and oh my gosh, this thing's amazing. And you're thinking, well, I need to make a map for my game. Like, what do I need? Right. And then someone will respond, all you need is a blank piece of paper and some pencils and pens, some colored pencils or some crayons and some markers, whatever. And you go like, oh yeah, right. I don't need to do that. So, I get it. It's funny in the sense that it seems so kind of almost silly, but I think it has value for people. Because remember, this is people who, they might have just gotten this game and they might not have come from a background where we're like, we've been building hex maps for our whole lives. So let's see. No fun allowed says, I'm making a zine in the vein of classic Dragon magazine here. Haha, this stuff teaches way more about the game than any official book could. I think it's just different, right? The book has a lot of responsibilities, and these articles just let to delve into certain details. It'll be interesting, fascinating, if you had a game where you had this kind of core. And because it's just a really slim core, you could be just like, yeah, this core is really, really just right next to no setting, really no implied setting, or as little implied setting as I can manage, explaining everything. And then you could have all these articles kind of building stuff on top of it. Because that's one thing that people ding the original rules for, is basically there's not a lot of guidance there. It's kind of just throwing the stuff at you. It doesn't totally make sense. And you kind of got to make it work. Well, these books or these magazines and everything are filling in all that stuff. Okay, well, yeah, it doesn't totally make sense, but here we'll make it make better sense. We'll give you the tools. Let's see. Brian Smith says, anachronistic terrain features feel magical, and players will do a lot of imagining to try to make sense of something randomly generated. This is true, but it can go too far. I think you got to be careful, because I feel like that's that same thing where, yeah, a little bit of gonzo can be a lot of fun, and I love to inject some kind of gonzo elements here and there, but at least I feel like at a certain extent, you lose coherence of your setting. It's interesting when it's unusual. And so you come in the mountains and you all of a sudden you see this desert plateau and you're like, oh my gosh, what is this? Yeah, get your mind racing. If everywhere you turn around, there's something like that, at some point you just go like, it doesn't make sense anymore. Like, I don't know what's going on. Part of it's kind of a stylistic thing, but I think picking and choosing and figuring out those elements, I think, is key, because too much when it swings too much in that direction, I feel like your setting just loses cohesion as a setting. Let's see. I've got the sun is right in my eyes when I'm looking at my second monitor where the chat is. No Fun Allowed says, I think what I've found is that the official books teach us about the game, and the fun stuff like zines teach us how to apply the game. Yep, pretty much. And they're also more free to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Opinionated. Because I think oftentimes with rules, maybe we shouldn't be, and not all rules are like this, but a lot of times with rules, we try to stand back and say, kind of like, here are the tools, kind of do with them how you will. I don't know, I don't want to tell you how to play the game, but here they are, right? Do what you want. I'm writing up stuff, and I'm constantly going back to hey, DMs, take this if you want to. If you don't want to, don't. And probably I shouldn't, but I I feel like I need to tell people and to keep empowering people to, hey, ignore these or do this as you will. Whereas with these articles, I think they feel much more to be like, no, this is my opinionated piece. Damn it. This is what you're going to do. And I think that can often be more helpful, but I think we're often we don't want to be that person almost in the way, people that kind of gatekeepery thing of the right way to play, wrong way, no fun kind of thing. We want to say, hey, do what you want. The articles are like, no, if you're reading this is what we're talking about. This is what I'm doing. Do it like this. And they can be more unabashed in that, what do we call prescriptive, I guess, approach. No, nothing says. It's also interesting to see how quickly they were willing to toss out core ideas. Like, can a fighter learn spells? Sure, 2%. Changing that rule from 0% to 2% is a big deal. Yeah, and it really opens up all these things you can do, right? Because if fighters can learn spells, and maybe some of them have, and maybe you run into one of those guys who have, or maybe there are devices to help with that, or maybe magic users have put out devices to hinder it even further. Maybe they've got some kind of golem or something that they've created, that they've sent out into the world, that just tries to detect magic using fighters to destroy them because you're honing in on their turf. All kinds of fun things you can spin out of just that, changing that percentage from absolutely impossible to just very, very hard or unlikely. Someone is doing something really loudly outside my window. Hopefully it's not coming across in the stream, but apologies if you're hearing that rumbling. It's not me. It's beyond my control. Okay, we got an ad for some stuff. Some Mighty Magic Miscellany. We get The Illusionist by Peter Aronson. Are we going to get some text? I'm not going to go through all the spells. I think we can get through it. It looks like can you only get there at 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th level? Am I reading that right? Let's see. Brian Smith says, the product of D&D seems so polished and worked out, I think it doesn't seem tweakable to new people. Older versions seem like, of course, you're going to tweak the hell out of it. Yeah, I think that's true. I think it is. It's sort of one of those interesting things, right? Because I would never wish, as a creator, I would like to be as polished as humanly possible. I would like to be as polished as the equipment and everything is on hand for me to be. In the same way that I don't think, musicians, for the most part, go out there and try to be unpolished. I think sometimes they will affect, kind of as an affectation, sort of go for a certain sound. But even that is not really unpolished so much as it is you're trying for an effect. Where I feel like unpolished is more, you almost don't know yet. You don't even know how to polish yet. You're just kind of doing what you can, and it's just imperfect. So yeah, these earlier versions definitely had that. I think also too, it's just the complexity of things. It's just a lot harder to figure things out in, say, 5th edition. You get in the DMG and you start reading about all the things that go into the calculations of CR, for example, even as imperfect as CR is, and you realize all the stuff. And then you have these concepts of how you're trying to balance things against each other. And it's just really tough. There's just a lot of things going on that can be easy to miss and easy to all kinds of ways. Different abilities are interacting with each other, and you can miss those, and they can do things in different ways that are kind of hard if you're not in the mindset. And I think even if you are, you can miss them. In the old edition, they just didn't have that much stuff. Part of that, just simplicity. We don't have all these things intersecting, so we don't need to worry about it. All right, so we got some spells here. And we have these levels, but they're illusionist. Oh, they're additions. So I guess these are just added levels for the illusionist. on to something earlier. We're getting some Royal Armies of the Hyborian Age, some additions to them by Lynn Carter. I'm going to skip this. This would be cool if you're doing something in the Conan universe and you need troops. But I'm going to skip. And let's see, we have an article here by Gygax about hobbits and thieves in the game dungeon, which I will also skip. This is a press release for what? Classic Warfare. It's a set of miniature rules for refighting battles during the ancient period of history. Okay, I'm going to skip, but cool. Hey, Wancholo. From what I heard, AD&D 1E was meant to provide a complete, codified, encompassing rules set for tournament play, while the original D&D and basic D&D were supposed to be freeform and personalized. I believe that's correct, Wancholo. I think what happened was everything evolved as things went on. And I think the original concept was that, people are going to tear these apart and put them together their own ways. They didn't even, D&D or TSR didn't even originate their own modules things. Other people published adventures first. It didn't even occur to them to do that. Then they saw that they were popular and that there was a space for them. They could sell them. They're like, oh, we'll do adventures. Once you get up to first edition, a couple things were going on, and I assume is accurate in the broadest of strokes, but if there's that Playing at the World book, if you're really interested in getting into the down and dirty of it, I think there's even that newer book that the same authors put out, whose name I'm missing out on, that I think might even go in more detail into the sort of fallout from the original or evolution of DSR and the kind of fallout between the two authors, Arneson and Gygax. But basically, when you get to AD&D, they're trying to jettison Arneson. So that's one element. And the other element is over the intervening years, what? So you're talking 73, 74 to, I think the Monster Manual comes out in 79, which I think is the first of the AD&D books. And then whatever, so 79, 80 over the intervening years. The concepts of organized play in different forms and gaming stores, gaming groups, tournaments, conventions like Gen Con. It's becoming a really big, I think, part of their business, part of their thinking moving forward. And so the idea earlier, because you'll find quotes from Gygax in these early magazines and stories, apocryphal stories of people calling him up on the phone, and it's dinner and someone calls him up and got some kind of question about a rule. And he'll basically say to them essentially, well, how did you rule it? And the person will say, oh, I did this, that, and the other. And he'll be like, great, let's do that, right? And in the beginning, that was good. Everybody could have their own, however way they wanted to do things, they could. But once you start getting into organized play, that becomes a detriment because you want somebody, and this is the same thing, that's Adventurers League today, kind of the same. You want somebody to be able to take their sheet or go in from one game to the next. If they're traveling, you're a traveling salesman, like in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. John Candy, you're out there selling whatever it was, like shower curtain accessories. So you're in Lake Geneva and you play in a game there, and they want you to be able to step in. You drive to Milwaukee, you get into a game there. They want you to be able to take whatever you learn and just be able to apply it right away and not have, these were the house rules in Lake Geneva at some gaming store, and now over here things are completely different, and I don't understand what's happening because now they do something crazy different ways. And then I go to a convention, I go to Gen Con in Indianapolis or wherever, and now it's something completely different again. And then, or even within rooms at a convention. Okay, so I'm at a convention in Terre Haute, Indiana, and I go to 5 tables, and each table is doing things in totally different ways. So they decided, like, look, if this is going to work, we need to kind of just get everything on a level so that you can just travel from game to game, place to place, around the world, around the planes, and you can play. And I think that entered into why in the DMG just gives you all those rules. They just wanted you to be able to step in and play and do that. And of course it wasn't just for the good of the game. It was for the good of them, so they could do all this organized play stuff. And I don't blame them for it. I think they understood what an opportunity it was to kind of cement themselves in their presence. But you realize that you just can't do things like almost comes to all businesses at a certain point where you're kind of doing things ad hoc. You're out of your garage. You just kind of everything's loosey goosey. Then you reach a point where you're like, okay, I can't do loosey goosey anymore. I gotta get the OSHA poster and put it up. I gotta put the employees must wash hands in the washroom notices, and I gotta kind of regularize stuff. And I think AD&D was a lot of that. We're gonna get all this stuff out there to kind of regularize the game, because at the core, if you take away all that stuff at the core of it, it really is just a slightly tweaked white box plus Greyhawk supplement, basically. Which means at the core of it, it's not all that different from BX, and really, it's not. When you look at granted, it's BECME, but when you look at the rules cyclopedia and it shows the things, at least for the GM, when you're converting stuff from AD&D and BECME or / rules cyclopedia, it's like a page, and it's stuff like, okay, swap your 3-point alignment to 9-point. Oh, we changed how morale is measured slightly. I mean, it's almost nothing. It's so small. The only thing that says a good percentage of this magazine is about wargaming, really shows the crossover between the two hobbies in the 70s. Indeed, I mean, I think they even refer to it a lot as, even though they're referring to D&D, they're kind of talking about it as wargaming. Brian Smith says, quote, "Sorry, honey, I have to tour the Midwest to battle dragons and delve dungeons. Be back in 3 months." Some dude from Cleveland in the 70s, probably. And then he walks out and the milkman walks in. Juan Cholo says, "When I was a kid and getting into my dad's D&D stuff, I loved basic D&D, but when I turned 12 to 13, I thought I must play AD&D now because it's advanced. Basic must be for little kids." Yeah, I think a lot of us who came in at that time around kind of felt that way. We always ended up playing with a hodgepodge of stuff, but yeah, I mean, there was that weird thing of like, oh, this is basic and this is advanced, or we're smart, we're 12 or whatever. I'm less than that, but oh, we got to play advanced. And I'm sure that was intentional at the time because they were trying to get Arneson out. So the idea is, okay, Arneson's going to get royalties on basic. So we need to move to something else. And how can we do that? And still, how can we do that? And how can we kind of get people? It's almost like Keurig thing of, oh, we're going to release a new machine with new cups. And these new cups are going to get, because we lost the patent, or our trademark, whatever, ran out on the original K-Cup. So now we have to make a new K-Cup, and then we have to convince everybody why they need to move over to the new K-Cup. And kind of, I feel like that advanced was part of that agenda of like, hey, get everybody to this other thing so that we get all the monies. We don't have to give Dave. And by the way, they ended up losing that. There was a lawsuit, of course, involved, and I believe they lost. So Dave still got his royalties on AD&D, but that was that they were trying to. And then one Cholo says, now I prefer basic and adding what I like from AD&D. Yep, pretty much. And the whys of all this stuff, because profit. Yeah, and I don't begrudge people to make some money if they can do it in a way that doesn't, out there harming people. I mean, heck, I'd love to be able to do this all day and make money fun. I hope people wouldn't begrudge me if I could make a coin doing that. And I don't begrudge folks making money for the stuff they're producing either. You don't want them to get into evil corporation territory. And you could probably make an argument that the way they were trying to screw Dave out of his money somewhat. I mean, granted, they weren't getting along, so I don't know what the end game would have been if they just kept that marriage of Gygax and Arneson together and tried to work it out. And of course, TSR was never, I think, the most wonderful place to work at and stuff anyway. Let's see. Ian says, "I thought Arneson only got the royalties for the basic sets, but they were required to continue producing them," something along those lines. I think that's what, I don't know exactly, and I can't remember from playing at the World, but I believe that he ended up getting royalties for everything, but that AD&D was definitely them trying to get him out. It just didn't work quite right. What the ultimate deal was with that, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and read it, so I'm sure I'm not getting the nuances right. But I think ultimately the AD&D as a move to eject Arneson from having to pay him, I believe, was a failure, but there may be some nuances to that I'm not super aware of. Because it's been a while since I read the book, and I'm not on top of it. So take it with a grain of salt or 12. So what is this stuff? So it looks like we have some more advertising some games. This is another story. Gen Con 9. Special guest Fritz Lieber in Lake Geneva. And now we have something to look forward to in the next issue of Dragon. Part 2 of the Gnome Cache, conclusion of the search for the Forbidden Chamber. Ooh, we got Monk versus Monk. and a new Swords and Sorcery novelette by Gardner Fox. Cool. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. And guys, if you Ian says you can't find a copy of Playing at the World, I'm pretty sure it's on, unless he's done something with it, should be on Kindle/PDF, I think. Because I read the electronic, I bought it electronically. So it might still be up on Amazon or some similar site for PDFs. I'm not sure. Hopefully, if it is, hopefully it's not out of print and it's just hard to find. Well, that is Dragon Magazine #1. Took a little bit longer than I thought, but as most things do, but awesome. Thanks everybody for hanging out. If you have suggestions on things to read next, I'm not intending this to be some kind of death march through every issue of Dragon from 1 until whenever. I'm happy to bounce around and really try to, I'm most interested in kind of the sort of those game advice, gameplay kind of articles that we mostly pay attention to. If you feel like, hey, there's an interesting one from another book, I would like to go find that part 1 of that article that was referencing the wilderness and see what other parts of it, and then find the other parts. That would be awesome. One show says, I love seeing those old ads. Yeah, the old ads and this covers and stuff are amazing. So if you have suggestions, let me know in the chat comments, or I guess since I'm wrapping up, maybe in the video comments would be more appropriate. I've also got forums now, so if you want to head over to the forums, you can log in. There is a topic for this video. You can also chat about in there other things to talk about. No Fun All That says, not doing every single dragon in every single dungeon magazine. No, I don't think I'm gonna do that. And I probably want, and I'll probably, if I ever get to it, probably the most I'll do is the dragon, the kind of range of dragon magazines, probably maybe up to 2nd edition. I don't know, maybe a little bit further. Again, I'm happy to delve into different things. Someone says, no, wait, there's a really great 4th edition version of the magazine, but it has something amazing in it. Cool, I'm happy to look it up. But I'm going to be concentrating on this stuff that's around, the white box to probably 2nd edition is going to be really 1st edition, I guess. It's going to be my wheelhouse for this, but I'm happy to go afield. And it doesn't have to be just Dragon. I'm happy to look at other magazines also. Possible to see an issue of the Dungeoneer? Yeah. I think I have. I bought something from somewhere, and they sent me a copy of the Dungeoneer with it. So I have at least one copy. But yeah, I went to see what's out there. Let me know, Brian Smith, if there's a particular issue of the Dungeoneer that stands out. Let me know, and I can try to track it down. Let's see. And then Ian says, Matt Colville was talking about putting ads in Arcadia because he remembers the ads from Dragon, and they were really cool. Yeah, because they were kind of naive and nice. I haven't seen any of the Arcadia mags. I'm sure they look good. I think if you can keep it to kind of interesting type ads, it could be fun, but I don't know. They weren't like the ads in Dragon weren't trying to be kind of cutesy and fun and nostalgic. They just are looking back at them. Some of the stuff you find in old magazines like the X-ray glasses and the sea monkeys and things like that are pretty blatantly really bad advertising, but they're just kind of fun now. But, they don't pass muster as far as things I would want. Not only looking to put a whole bunch of weird bait and switch, stuff that's targeting kids with, lies and, that kind of thing, right? But they're just sort of fun because they were everywhere at the time, and I guess no one was paying attention. And as kids, I don't remember anyone ever ordering the X-ray glasses. So I don't know if anyone just with the disappointed must have been kind of like the what's his name in the Christmas Story when he finally puts together Little Orphan Annie's decoder ring and just gets drink more Ovaltine. But it's they're fun. It would only be more fun to have artists do fake ads that were just sort of fun and just maybe playing on the nostalgia and then putting real ads in just for the real ads. And then Ian says, Arcadia has some of the best art in the industry right now. Okay, I believe it. I believe it. And then Brian Smith says, we don't need to see a bunch of Dwarven Forge ads. Yeah, pretty much. All right, folks. Well, listen, I'm going to let you guys go on your way out. If you can give this a thumbs up, that would be awesome. Thanks always for hanging out. The forums are up. So I'll do one last reminder. If you want to, it's no big deal. If you feel like, I'm on too much stuff, I can't stand this no more, don't worry about it. I'm not going to be absent from any other avenues. but I will probably push it a little bit because it's a nice, cleaner, easier way to kind of centralize discussion than it getting scattered around YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, wherever. So it's there if you want it, but if you don't want it, no problem. Ryan Smith mentions Dungeoneer 16, some cool cover art and a couple of magic user subclasses. Ooh, maybe I'll try to check that out. So yeah, let me know what other ones you would like to see in this kind of sub-series of the read-alongs. Raid Shadow Legends ad incoming. Ooh. Other than that, have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you're watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody, and I'll talk to you later.